Welcome to Write the Damn Book Already. I'm Elizabeth Lyons, and I teach you how to write and publish powerful, thought-provoking nonfiction and memoir without overcomplicating it, overthinking it, or having to go off into no man's land for 3 months. Listen in each week to learn more and get your hands on all my great free book writing resources at elizabethlyons.com. Hi, everybody, and welcome to this next episode. I got to be honest with you, I don't even know how to introduce this person. Tyler Merritt is a force. Let's just say that. He is a force and a gift, and I was so excited when he agreed to join me on the podcast, and I still didn't even know what I was in for. His delightful assistant asked how long I needed, and I said, I just need 30 minutes. I'm trying really hard to keep these things brief. I'm going to let Tyler talk for 29 minutes and 58 seconds. I just need 30 minutes. And Tyler was so great. He gave me far more than 30 minutes. We had what was one of truly the best conversations I've ever had. And I just know that you are going to be so enlightened, and you are going to think after this, and you are going to have your perspective shifted on things, not just about book writing either. I could have talked to him for days. In fact, funny story, I was getting my car serviced this morning, and one of the car salespeople and I were chatting, and he said, I don't remember how we got here, but I said, I have a book for you. And I had him pull up. I said, do you read books? And he said, no. I said, do you listen to books? He said, yes. I said, what service do you use? Audible. Pull it up. He pulled it up. I said, search Tyler Merritt. He did. He said, is it this I Take My Coffee Black book? I said, yes. He bought it right there. And then he said, look, I'm buying it. I said, you don't have to prove it to me. I believe it. The audiobook of Tyler's book, you just have to buy it all. I have both. I started with the audiobook and I was loving the style so much. And then there were all these things I wanted to underline. And so I bought the hard copy too. And now sometimes I'd listen to it while I was reading, and sometimes I'd just read it, and sometimes I'd just listen to it. But I'm going to stop talking because this interview does all the talking for me. And I know that's what you want to get to. So let's just get in there.
Where are you?
I'm in Phoenix, melting.
Okay. Is it super hot?
It's not great. I think it's 112 or 113 today.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Growing up in Las Vegas, I know those dry desert temperatures.
Yep. They're like, it's a dry heat. And I say, put your head in an oven and turn on a hair dryer. Does that feel good? No, it doesn't.
Elizabeth, when I tell you, living here in Nashville, how many people say to me, oh no, it's so much worse here because of the humidity. And I'm like, it is hot here. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But in the desert heat, you can't go out and get into your car because your car has changed temperature.
100%.
Your car has started to melt. And so you're like, I can't even be here.
I third degree burns. Like, who can I sue? Because I just sat in the car and touched the steering wheel and I have third degree burns. Like,
exactly.
Well, yeah. So I hear you.
The sun. You can't sue the desert, so there you go.
I mean, if you could, somebody would be doing it for sure, right? Come on. So I was like, do I start this with the line that made me laugh so hard that I think my neighbors were concerned? Or do I start with the line that made me cry? And I think starting with laughter is always good because I'm just such a huge fan of the laughter. So is it okay if I read a part of this?
Yes.
Okay, it's brief. I'm not gonna
do you.
There's no monologue here.
I have blocked you off some time, so you're good.
Oh my God. Well, I want you to have 92.645% of the talk. Nobody wants to hear me right now. They want to hear you. So when I read this, though, I died. So you said you're looking at your different electives that you wanted to take. And you said, I looked at pottery, but that seemed messy. Also, it reminded me of the film Ghosts. And I was uncomfortable if that, if that was the teaching technique. I was like, I can see him imagining himself at the wheel.
Like, no, I don't, I can't. No. Yeah.
Like, come on. as though that didn't have me. I mean, tears. We have the next line. Badminton, I assumed, would get me hot and sweaty during the middle of the day. Also, I was very uncomfortable with the
Mm-hmm. You can say it. Shuttlecock. Yeah.
And then you just say, moving on.
Just like I'm gonna leave that there and we're just shuttlecock. Nope, couldn't do it.
Shuttlecock.
Yeah.
I mean, really though, if we really peel that back, like who decided that was a good?
Who we don't know.
We don't know. I feel like I want to Google it after this though. Like, who came up with that?
Let me tell you what I love, Elizabeth. So when you were talking, I'm not sure where this is going to start in the midst of your podcast, but you were talking about a minute ago. You mentioned you'd never know what's going to echo out of the book, out of the pages that you write. Like some moments will, attach to people and some won't. So there is so much like niche joke, like humor in this book that my editor just let me just leave in the book. Like, and to be really clear, I think the book was 138,000 words originally. That's just like so many words. It's like so many. And so we had to cut it down to like 90. Mm-hmm. So myself and my writing partner, Dave, like there was parts where we just threw out, like we were just so over it. We were just like, we can't, but there were certain jokes that we would leave in. And I'm a firm believer in writing, in a community writing, which is very different than a lot of authors. A lot of authors are like, let me go away, write this book, and then I'll bring it back and here's your book. Me, I'm very much so like, before I put it out in the world, I kind of want to fill this out with people, right? So I had like a writing community of people. I would write a chapter and I would send it to 15, 17 people. And there were a lot of, my mom and dad were in it. Jimmy Kimmel was in it. Like there were a lot of people that was in this group. And with that, I was able to kind of weed out the things that I thought like landed the strongest. But even in that moment, there were times where there were jokes that were just for me, that I was like, I don't know if anybody's going to laugh at this. I don't know if anybody's going to care about these moments. And when you're writing humor, especially in a book that is so heavy, right? Like, because you have all these authors right now that have books out like How to Be Anti-Racist or Caste or all these things. And here I come along with a book that has that kind of weight, but like has Alanis Morissette in it and Sandy Patty and Tupac and Shuttlecock, right? And so I all that to say, the jokes that ended up in this book, I sometimes forget what we cut and what we left. And so somebody will come along and will say a joke to me and I'll be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this joke made the book.
Made it in.
Like, yeah. I can't. In fact, there's a super niche joke that, like a super, very specific to me joke that I feel like nobody was going to get, but I thought was so funny that I left in the book. It's a line where I'm talking about, I say something to the effect of, I'm talking about the musical Les Mis, mm-hmm. and I say something to the effect of Black people were finally allowed to hear the people sing, like in the revival of Les Mis or something like that. A very specific joke about how when Les Mis on Broadway was revived 10 years ago, they cast a ton of people of color. Nobody knows this information. Like nobody cares. Like, you know what I mean? Like nobody's paying attention to that. But to me, that was always funny. So in the book, I'm like, finally, when Les Mis allowed Black people in and they could finally hear the people sing, I wrote that line and I thought that was the funniest-ish in the world. Like, I thought it was hysterical. And then a couple people read it and they were like, we don't get it. So
and you're like, well, I do, and it's my book, so.
Right. One time somebody hit me up on social media and like wrote me, which we get, we get tons of messages. And somebody wrote me and they were like, oh my gosh, the line about Les Mis was the best. And I was like, I think I found my people.
Yeah. Yeah. But like, I'm so curious because so one of the challenges when you have a community and you're showing them your work as you're writing it is you can have 10 of the most brilliant, funny, kind, and they all give you different answers. So how did you ultimately say, I take your feedback and also I'm going to do what I want to do?
I'll tell you what I did, what was really interesting. And not all authors have the ability to do this, but because of how I had it set up, what I would do is I would send out a chapter, and I didn't send out big chunks. I would send them one chapter, and I would say, do me a favor, tell me 5 things that you loved, right? And so if, say you have 15 people, and you continue to see 1, 2, 3, 4 of the same thing over and over again, that stuff stays. You know what I mean? Like that stays. And then everything else kind of becomes kind of loose and opinions, and kind of allows me as a writer to go, maybe we don't need this, or maybe this didn't exactly land right. I'll give you 2 big examples. And I've said this a couple of times to groups of people who've asked me about this in book clubs. I went hardcore on Lea Salonga, who is the lead singer in the musical Miss Saigon. I talked about her a little bit. I'm like, a young Lea. I wrote like 4 pages on this woman, like just deep dived into Lea Salonga. And my editor was like, Tyler, like, I love you, but nobody cares. Like, and I'm like, but I care. She's like, yeah, this is a hard one. Yeah. And she was right. Like, I was sending it out and people were like, we love Leia, but 5 pages, bro? Like 5 pages? And then also I'm a huge fan of Counting Crows. And there were like another like 6 pages of just me going on and on about Counting Crows and Adam Duritz. And, even my Counting Crows fans were like, bro, this is you might want to,
about the Counting Crows.
This book is not about
Counting Crows. Yeah.
Right. It's not about Counting Crows. Yeah. And finally, when the book was done and we had people that were reading it to endorse it, Adam Duritz from Counting Crows was one of the people that wrote. Well, he's on the back of the book.
Yeah.
He makes a commentary about it. He went to go read it, and I had taken out my 6 pages of Counting Crows at that point. And all I was thinking was, bro, I wrote like half a chapter, based on you. I mean, I still named a chapter, Broken Frame, August, and everything after. So
you want to be like, Adam, just so you know, this is a real dedication to you. Like, there was so much more. And if you'd like me to send that to you.
Yeah. What was great though, and you can kind of feel this, I think, Elizabeth, is this book was like a love letter to all the things I love.
Yes.
Right? But talking about me being a Black man in the midst of it, and sneaking in education in a way that I like to get it, like if you educate me in the midst of a story, I'm going to follow you.
Yeah. And that, like, I could not put the book down. And that's saying a ton, because I'm always reading 6 or 7 books at a time. It's not something I'm proud of, but that's what's going on. I could not put this book down. And I think it was a combination. Number 1, it was your story. Number 2, it was your sense of humor, which is so fantastic. And 3, it was a brilliant history lesson. So, I mean, this is going to be audio only. So for people who have never, like, I'm white. Like, I'm quite white. Okay. And, it was in reading this that I recognized. So it wasn't until about 14 years ago. I have 5 kids. Sure. And my youngest is Ethiopian. So it wasn't until my youngest, whose name is Nina, came home that I started really realizing how little I knew about the Black experience. Yeah. I felt ashamed of it. And also I gave myself some grace, because I was like, why would I? Like, I didn't grow up in a Black community. I didn't have any Black friends. Sure, I mean, it just, that's what it was. And I just dove in and wanted to and I still learned so much. And I have what could it could be perceived as a very ignorant question, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Ask away. Okay.
So one thing I noticed is you don't capitalize the word Black when you say I'm a Black man or and I was curious about that. And it made me start to think, was that a choice? I thought it was something we were like, I'm putting air quotes, but supposed to do now.
Sure.
Is it something that non-Black people are supposed to do? Like,
well, this is how I feel about it.
I know we don't capitalize white, to be clear.
To be clear, we do not. That's our reparations. You will forever have lowercase letters. No, I'll tell you this. I think in language currently, I don't know if it's a rule, and since it's not, and I have brilliant copy editors and editors that just kind of let me leave it the way it was. We kind of just left it the way it was. And it wasn't because I was trying to downplay anything, but reading my book, you also know I say, Black people, we are not monolithic, right? Like, we're not one thing. So you could come along and speak to some other author at some point. You can speak to Ibram one day and it could be like, I only use capital letter. In fact, the whole word is capitalized, and I'll be like, okay, cool. But in the midst of my book, it just wasn't something that I put too much energy or focus on.
Yeah.
And so, I wish I had a really technical answer, but
I think that's a great answer because it's the truth.
Yeah.
And I just noticed it and I thought, I really waffled with this. Like I wrestled with it. I'm like, do I ask that? How dumb does this make me look to ask this question? And then I just thought, well, I feel safe asking, Tyler. So I'm going to ask. And if, sometimes when I edit, go ahead.
Let me say something about feeling safe, Elizabeth. First of all, you having me on your podcast to make more people aware of my book, I thank you for that. Because and it's also because you loved it. And because you loved it, that's great. I'm assuming you probably don't have a ton of people on your podcast that you just hated their book. So I'm going to say thank you for that. But also, once you read my book, you realize that I have made a decision to lean into proximity, to lean into open explanation, to lead into creating a safe place for people to discuss things so that we can grow. I want to be really clear, especially for the Black people that are listening to this. I am a firm believer that it is not our job as Black people to educate white people about us. We spend the entirety of our high school career learning a history that is mostly white and then get tested on it, right? So I don't feel like it is our job as Black people to educate white people. Right. But I do feel this. I do feel like if there are white people who are willing to listen, to walk with Black people that are willing to share their stories, share their experience, and offer and answer questions, if there are those Black people that want to do that, and you are a white person or whoever, you're not a Black person who wants to lean into that experience, I say take it every opportunity and every chance that you get, but not with the expectation that it's Black people's responsibility to train and or teach. And we're in a time period right now where there is so much opportunity to learn about the Black experience. There are so many books out there that you can read, so many movies, so many things. But I think that two people sitting down together and having a discussion and being able to look each other in the face, being able to have empathy because that person is real, I think that means something, which is one of the reasons why I lean so heavy into transparency in my book. Like, I didn't want to just go, hey, here's some stories that are funny and cool and we can relate. But by the end of the book, I wanted you to feel like, I know this guy probably better than I know most of my really good friends.
It's a full spectrum thing. That was what I took from it, is I felt like, I share the sentiment that it's not the Black community's responsibility to educate the white community. And I am a loquacious person. I love to talk. And when it comes to this, I love to listen. I just want to hear people's experiences, not as a collective, but individually. Like, my daughter's from Ethiopia. She doesn't know, she was 13 weeks old, when she came home. She doesn't know this is all she knows. So her experience is going to be I have a very good friend who's Jamaican. I have, the experiences are all so different and they're so beautiful. And in being able to absorb it through your book, like I really felt, I think that's one of the things that's so unique about your book and the way that you tell your story is that it's through all the different facets of you.
Yeah.
Like you just hear it all. So I'm curious because there's so much in here, right? How did you figure out how to organize? Like when you sat down on day one and we're like, I'm gonna write a book. How did you not feel overwhelmed, or did you feel overwhelmed by everything you wanted to say and how to?
So let me tell you a little secret that a handful of people that are close to me know this. My favorite rapper, you're gonna be like, why are we going this way? But if you hang out with me, you realize I take long ways around things.
I trust that you'll land the plane because I trust that I hope people trust that I will, right?
My favorite rapper is Jay-Z, okay? And they call Jay-Z Hova. They call him Young Hov. And they call him that because they say he has a God-given gift. And that gift is when he was growing up, he used to sell drugs and he'd be on the street and he didn't have pen or paper to write. So he would create these lyrics and rhymes in his head. And he used it almost like an exercise to where he would write whole songs in his head. Now, as an adult rapper, grown-up person, he still does the same thing. And it's an amazing thing to watch. He'll go into the booth, he'll hear a beat, and whoever's producing the record will be like, ready, Jay? He'll go, yeah. He'll go in the corner and kind of mumble a little bit. And then he'll come up and he'll just do a verse in one take. And it's crazy. Like every rapper, like, who are you? That's how they call him Young Ho. They call him God. And I walk a lot. Yeah. I talk about in the book. And so what started happening is I would, in the 2 years that I kind of took a hiatus away from everything, this book started to write itself. And I would write these things on my walk. And so I would take a 4-mile walk. I would get out of my car, put on my headphones, and it was like I would black out, right? And then 4 miles later, I'd come back and I'd be like, that's a whole chapter. It's done. And I would have it kind of from beginning to end, how I wanted that chapter to structure and go. And before I knew it, I had the beginning and the end of the book. I knew what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to open it with the reader of an experience with me experiencing the old white lady in the blue truck. Like I wanted to open that experience up for you with you not knowing anything about me at this point. That first chapter, I'm just a dude, right? But what I do in that chapter is I drop you some hints in there of things like Alabama, Roll Tide. I say a bunch of things in this first chapter that are just little tastes of things. I'm like Bon Jovi. I'd say I'm listening to Bring It On the Musical. So I'm telling you all these weird things that are just like, what? But what I'm doing is kind of peppering this first chapter and letting you know who you're about to meet. And then I spend 16 chapters telling you who I am. Mm-hmm. I tell you about my God experience, my musical you figure out suddenly, this is why this guy's listening to Bon Jovi. Because he has an obsession with girls. Or a girl was like, I like Bon Jovi. And I was like, so do I. Okay, that's why he's listening to Bon Jovi. This is why he's listening to Bring It On the Musical. Because he's accidentally stumbled in the theater. And in that and all those chapters, I then tell you who I am. And in my mind, I wrote all those chapters to bring you to chapter 18, to bring you back to the girl in the old lady in the car. But now, you know me. Yeah. Right? So now when this experience happens, it's a whole other experience for you as a reader.
You're 100%. Yes. Because I read, that was my experience, is that it was a totally different experience. And I kind of wrestled with how I felt about it because it made me angry and sad and all at once.
Yeah.
Because I don't know her, although I do know her.
We know her.
We know her. But I knew you. I felt like I knew you from chapter 1. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. By chapter 18, having really bared yourself quite raw, which I often tell people, you don't owe everybody an explanation of everything. Just because you've written a book, you're allowed to keep some things private. And if this is an and, if you choose to bear everything, man, it's so freeing because you got nothing left to hide. There's nothing left, right? People can come at you with anything. And so when you went home from those walks, did you write it? Did you type it? Did you record it? Did you?
I did it. I did it. My writing process, like I said, I have a writing partner named Dave Tish, and he's just the coolest dude. And when I decided to actually write the whole book in its entirety, we would sit down and we would doctor through each chapter, him and I. Okay. And I love him because he's a great listener. And we would doctor the words and massage them in a way that to get the best effect, like the same way I do with my with videos that I put out too, you know. People will watch a video and they'll be like, "Oh, that was great. How long did it take you?" I'm like, "A while." I didn't just throw that out there, you know. But because I had this kind of Jay-Z writing style, when I would sit down to work on a chapter, I knew the beats, you know. I knew where I wanted things to land. I knew how I wanted a chapter to end. And I had a whole full picture of the entirety of the book, so I knew where I was going. Yeah. Right? And what was great is people that got to read the book that were in my reading group, that got to read chapter by chapter, they didn't know where I was going, right? My mom didn't know where I was going. So
how adorable is she, by the way? Come on.
Listen, anytime I do a live reading or anything, the response from everybody, the first thing they say is, there's three things they say. They're like, "Hey, I want to meet your mother." That's the first thing. That's always the first thing. The second thing is, Are you going to turn this into a play? Because people feel it's so personal, it's so like spoken to them that they can almost visualize it, right? And I don't know if you got a chance to listen to the audiobook, but the audiobook, we've made it really special with sound effects and, you know.
That's so where I have that written down because so the funny thing is I started with the audiobook and I loved it so much. And then I got to the part where your mom was speaking and then your dad was speaking. And I was like, I'm sorry to keep using the word brilliant, but this is just fantastic. Then I had some trouble because I needed to underline some stuff. Like you were saying something. So then I ordered the book. Then I was listening to the audio while I was reading the book. I mean, it was a whole interaction.
Yeah. And listen, I'm glad you're saying that out loud because that was my goal. That's
really?
What I was 100%. Because me being very aware that everybody learns in different ways, right? Me being very aware that somebody will buy the most popular book that is going to become a movie. They'll buy that book and set it on the counter, never read the book, but they'll watch the movie 12 times, right? Because they, you know, in their mind, they're like, I want to read the book, but that's not really how I take this in, right? And then, of course, you have the readers that are like, I need the words. And then you have, you know, and so what I tried to do was create an environment where if you were reading the book still sounded like I was talking to you, so that when you flipped over to the audiobook, it felt like you felt what you were reading, you know?
All day. But you have a voice. I'm sure you've heard this 762,000 times. You have like a voice and a personality where you write the way you talk. Yeah. So it's not hard to hear you even reading the words. It's not hard, but it is like a whole different experience with the book because you don't follow it verbatim. You're close. You're very close, but you're in it. Like you're not acting it as though it's on, but you're in it. It's an experience, right?
Listen, Elizabeth, I will tell you this. When I recorded the audiobook, I had forgot how in it I was. And I didn't remember until it was done and I was able to listen to it. And I'm like, I'm thinking, I spent hours reading this. I don't want to listen to my own audiobook. Elizabeth, I popped it in and I was so dialed in. I was like, oh my God. this is so good right now. And like I was like, I know where this is going. Like, I know how this ends. Why am I so enthralled in this? But it occurred to me that when I was in the studio, that's where I was, especially as you get farther in to the end of the book, like chapter 17, AKA My Husband Found Your Pictures, that whole chapter, you know, I
laugh, but
it's the truth.
Yeah.
Like there's a part, and this, I feel like this is a little bit spoiler alert for folks that didn't read the book yet, but there's a part in the book where a gentleman like comes after me. And before he comes after me, a girl from my youth group, a young girl who knew me as a pastor, comes over and she's like, "Hey, Pastor Tyler," right? And I'm like, this is not the time. But so when I was in the studio reading it, I just naturally went into these different voices.
Yeah.
But I had forgotten that I did it. Like, it wasn't like I planned it. I didn't have it written down, like, go into this voice. But I'm just reading it and I'm like, "Hey, Pastor Tyler." I'm like, "Bitch, go away." Blah, blah, blah. Hell, right? It's just like I'm telling the story, and it was like, and so when I finally went back and listened to it, and it's produced so wonderfully by my producer Jen,
who's on there too, who's hilarious.
And I want that was on purpose too. I wanted to add her, right? I wanted to create this like kind of white woman who's kind of a character in it too, who stops every once in a while. I was like, "So what does that mean?" You know, and it also gives me an opportunity for her to say to me like, "Hey, are you okay?" And for me to be like, "No, I'm not really. I want to move on." You know, so
yeah,
it's a thing, man. It's one of the. Listen, I say this to a lot of people because I wrote music most of my life too. Sometimes I'll hear a song on the radio, and I'll go, "God, I wish I would have wrote that song. God, I wish I would have wrote that song." And I don't mean this in a cocky way when I say this. I just mean this realistic.
Mm-hmm.
When I take my coffee black, this is one of those books that I'm like, "God, I wish I would have wrote that book." And I'm like, "Oh, but I did."
I did. You know what I feel like? I almost feel like the audiobook is like a musical. You just don't sing.
Yeah. Yeah.
You sing without singing, if that even makes sense, right? It's an experience.
Yeah.
I have to say, it's an experience. Are you thinking about turning it into a show?
There's a lot of conversation. There's some things I can't talk about. So
sure.
The simple answer is I haven't got there yet.
Okay.
Where I am right now is I have a kids book coming out, and
which I can't. I'm so in love. Yeah.
The kids book comes out in September, and then I'm kind of working on this other project, and then I'm thinking about the next book, the next adult book, and man, I don't know. I have such a love for the stage that if I'm gonna do a stage version of I Take My Coffee Black, it has to be right, you know?
Yeah. It would be. Let me just go out there and say that. It would be. It would be.
Yeah. So we'll see. I love that you're sometimes, and you know this, sometimes we get on podcasts, especially podcast folks that just want to like, come on, let's chat, you know, and they kind of know the book a little bit, but I really appreciate the fact that you know it well and you were in it, and it means a lot.
Oh my God. I can't imagine asking someone to be on my podcast and having not read the book.
It's a thing. It's a thing.
I don't understand. Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of things in this world I don't understand, but that's definitely one of them. Like, talk about an opportunity for me to put my foot in my mouth accidentally. Yeah. You know? So
the only reason I get sad about it, because I understand, listen, let me just be really clear about this. The podcast business industry is a lot. It's difficult, right? And you have different people on for different reasons. So you can't always be caught up. That's also why, especially as your podcast gets more popular, you might have a team of people that kind of help you kind of figure out. And so I'm not mad about that. But when I'm on with somebody and we start talking about my book, and I can see in their eyes that they haven't completely read it yet, I always love at the end of the podcast, they're like, "I need to go read this right now." And then like they'll call me a week later and they'll be like, "Dude, I feel like we need to do this podcast over again."
You're like, I'm unavailable.
You're like, yeah, like I want to really talk about this now. So it's fun to be able to really talk to you about it. And it means
love
a lot.
That. No, can we talk about Trapper Keepers for a minute? That was another place you got me. I'm like, this is my people. I mean, Do you remember going to the store before the Trapper Keeper was everything?
Everything.
My favorite had pandas
now.
on it.
I would go back to school now if you told me I could have a Trapper Keeper.
The back to school section, I open the crayons and like smell them. Like it's a thing. But they don't make Trapper Keepers anymore.
Yeah. I don't know why. Like that was our jam.
Functional. Did you put bubbly stickers on yours?
Everything. Are you kidding me? Like that's how you rolled with Trapper Keeper. It didn't matter who you were. You could be a hardcore like gangster in middle school, but you still had your Trapper Keeper like a champ.
See, yeah. I just miss them so much. I think, could you try to bring them back? I feel like it could happen.
You know, I feel like between me and Stranger Things, like we might be able to like do something. Yeah.
That and your reference, and then in a minute, and then I'm going to let you go. I'm going to show you exactly how much of this book I read. Because I think I might win an award for like having read parts of the book that people don't even read. Sliding Doors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I have referenced that movie. And most of the time, and the other thing is I had to laugh because conscious uncoupling.
Yeah.
I've been saying, so I'm consciously uncoupled. And I've been saying that with pride for 10 years. I'm like, listen, we did this before Gwyneth made it a thing. And then when I was reading, I was like, I think Tyler's making fun of me a little bit. Like, is this a very white person thing to be like, we're consciously uncoupled? Because like we did, but Sliding Doors. So of course Gwyneth was in Sliding Doors, and I would mention Sliding Doors to people. And no, I swear no one else has seen the movie, but I think it's so poetic.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll tell you what's great is like anything, when you write a book that starts to become popular or anything, people want to dive into those things. So like there's a part in the book where I say, I love the movie That Thing You Do. Stop right now and go watch that movie. And I say the movie Love Actually. There's a lot of, references in there that I'm like, I need you to go watch this, Sliding Doors is a movie that so many people had not seen until they read my book and then went out and watched it, right? Because I talk about it all throughout the book. But I'm so captivated by that idea, though, that it's just those singular moments. Like for me, no questions asked me on the shadow of a doubt. If I would have got into that Spanish class, I wouldn't be sitting here right now.
Yep.
Like it just happened that Spanish class was full and I got dumped in my secondary elective. And that was my sliding door moment that shifted my whole everything. I think about my mom being wise and being the wisdom driven woman that she is to go, Tyler, you should go to this summer camp because there's girls there. You know what I mean? Like that wisdom from my mom, although it was just like that singular thing changed my life.
Yeah. And
like she could have said a million things.
Well, and you, I'm not quoting this verbatim. I just wrote it down. You talk a lot about how your mom is always the person who reminds you who you are. And that it just, like, we all need a person in our lives. It's not always our mom or our dad or our, but it just made my heart explode for you. Like just that you have that, that she's that for you. Right.
Let me tell you, Elizabeth, like, I didn't realize until I got to the end of this book how like directional my mother was throughout my life.
Really?
And not until I went and wrote this book and looked back over it, I looked back and I was like, at almost every single point, like going to performing arts school, my mom was like, no, you're going, right? When I decided to move to Nashville, my mom was like, just go. And I look back over my life, I'm going, oh my gosh, she was so pivotal in all these moments. And she directed me throughout. And she also was always reminding me who I was. To me, one of the most powerful parts of the book that we don't talk about a lot, because honestly, I don't even like talking about this chapter a lot because it's weirdly still raw to me. But the chapter, Your Husband Found My Pictures chapter, there's the part where I'm talking about the gentleman who approaches me. And I say in the book, like, I looked at him and thought, what if he doesn't have a mom like mine to fall back on?
Yeah.
Like that singular moment of my reality of going like, I had this special, no matter all this crap that I had been through all of my life, I had this special thing with me because my mom was there, and not everybody has that. And I'm hurting this guy right now, and I don't know if he has that thing that I had. Like, who's gonna pull him back off the cliff? To me, that was one of the most, like, the biggest statements having to do with my mom than anything was that moment, you know?
It's so interesting to me that when you're writing a book, you become so much more clear about some things that you thought you were clear on. And then it's like, oh, wow, I wasn't and it's a gift.
100%. It's therapy. It's therapy, whether you like it or not.
Whether you like it or not. Yeah. So try to like it, because that's usually a better way to go.
Yeah. I wish I just wrote about, like, not simple things, but, like, it'd be easy if I just wrote about kittens, you know?
I don't know. Do you think it would be easy? Like, would it be easy for you to just write about kittens, or would you be bored out of your gourd?
I would probably be bored, but it'd be easier, you know? But that's also why there's so much humor in this book, because I had to pull myself out of some of the places I was talking about. Like, you do realize that we talk about lynching and vaginal steaming, steaming and lynching in the same chapter.
Vaginal steaming and lynching in the same chapter.
That's the epitome of I take my coffee black.
100%. Like, and I think what it does for the reader too, is it helps to pull the reader back up too. Because yes, in the last couple of years, there are so many wonderful books that have come out that help people get a different perspective and learn, and all these, so much of this, Tyler, you know, they don't teach this stuff in school.
100%.
So, I mean, I'm like, wait a minute. I mean, my kids also don't know how to write a check or read a clock with hands on it. Like, these are all issues, right? It's like, what?
Right.
You know, so, okay, here's how I'm going to prove to you that I read more than the average person in the book.
Okay.
TV credit, Outer Banks.
Yeah. Outer Banks. What? I love that show.
You were on it, or?
Yeah, for sure. So I'll tell you what really happened. What really happened is, do you watch it?
I have watched it, but now I got to go start over.
Yeah. What had happened was the very first season, there's a character named Pope. He's the black kid of all of them. And I was reading for his father, and they had me read for his father probably 4 different times. The casting director did. And we were getting closer and closer to the shoot date, and they had me read for him again. But it came down to it that I looked probably a little too young to play his dad. And but they still wanted me to be a part of the show. And so they reached out. And here's something that a lot of people don't know is when you're in a show at the very first season as an actor, if they give you the option to be in the show in the first season, you take it. The reason why you take it is because you don't know if that show is going to go on and have a second season. So you're just like, take it while you can, because this could get canceled. So they called me and they were like, hey, there's this role of like a grave digger guy who the kids are chasing through a graveyard, and they get chased. They think they're getting chased by someone else, but it's actually you. And so I think it's in episode 3 or 4, and I chase them out. Pope jumps over this fence, gets his underwear stuck on a gate. You'll completely know now.
I remember that.
And then there's this guy that comes up behind him and is like, kids nowadays can't, something like that. Anyways, I'm that guy. You will never not see it. Like, now that I say it, you will never not see it, because you will go, there's Tyler. That's Tyler Merritt. But I get on the set, right? And I see these beautiful kids who are so crazy talented. And I'm like, this show's going to run forever. I just took this like role, and this show is going to run forever. So my agent just sent me an audition for season 3. Is it season 3? And I was like, I've already been in it. She's like, yeah, you're right. You can't be in it again. I'm like, yeah, I know. Yeah, because that's how it works.
Really? So you can't be in it to play a different character?
You can't be in it to play a different character. And even though my character was, like I said, you will not miss it. You can't, now that I've told you, it's like you will never not see it. But you take a risk when you're an actor. You're like, okay, I'll go. Who knows if this show's going to be around? And as soon as I got on set, I looked at how awesome these kids were, how beautiful they were, how great they were adapting to this script. And I was like, Outer Banks is going to have like 28 seasons.
Yeah. My kids are obsessed with it. That's the
Yeah,
only way I know of it.
Yeah, I love them. The kids, they're so good. And then I got to work on a Marvel project called Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which I loved. Got to work on a TV show on Apple called Swagger. There's a new movie coming out that I did with Gabrielle Union and an incredible actor too. So anyways, it's called The Inspection. So it's great to be able to write and to act and to do all the things that you want to do. And it's a beautifully charmed, wonderful life.
Right?
Yeah. I'm glad you asked about it.
Yeah, no, I was reading, I read the whole like acknowledgments, about the author. I'm like the person who eats the peel on the orange too. You know, it's like, let's consume it all. Why not? So I'll end with, I said I didn't know whether to start with what made me laugh, or this doesn't really make me cry unless I'm in a specific state, but it touched me so much. This line that you have about, it's on page 222, but I cannot tell you what a gift it is to be able to share the depths of your brokenness with someone and have that person say, don't worry, I'm not going anywhere. That love feels, well, it feels a lot like being loved by God, I would imagine. And I just, you know, I'm so in that, I read it, Tyler, and I had to close the book for like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Because I have someone in my world who I didn't even realize until I read that that's what this person is. And what an incredible gift.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, you put it into words in such a beautiful way that it's something I haven't been able to put into words.
Sure. I appreciate you that the fact that sentiment echoed with you. There were so many times when I was writing this book I was like thinking to myself, like, is this too personal? You know, is this too transparent, telling these people what it was that got me through, you know? And knowing that it paid off, you know, and that it spoke to you means the world. I was talking to somebody recently about every author thinks their book is so important, right? Every author, I don't care if it's a cookbook, I don't care if it's whatever, everybody thinks that their book is the most important thing. But there's so many layers in this book. It's not just about a Black experience. It's about, what do we do with those people who feel like they have messed up so badly that they don't have any more worth, right? Like, what did we lose with those people? Like, we decided that because of what they've done, there's no more worth for them. And it's a story about someone finding their worth in the midst of all of their messed upness, you know? My editor, actually the head of my publishing company, the marketing team came to me, and the book is subtitled Reflections of Tupac, Musical Theater, Faith, and Being Black in America. We had the Tupac part, we had the musical theater part, and there was a long period of time where they wanted to use the word Jesus. Tupac, musical theater, Jesus, and being Black in America. And I said no. And I kind of fought that vehemently because too many people are turned off by all of the attachments to Christianity, to any kind of God, right? And so we ended up going with faith, which I really appreciated. But here's the truth. If you read this book, I talk about Jesus a lot. But in a very real, honest way, where I found myself halfway through the book going, I don't know if Christians are even gonna like this book. You know, because I was just too honest about it. I was just too like, this Jesus that I met as a tiny kid in high school was a very specific kind of God that I thought I was supposed to serve. And now, years later, this God does not look the same to me, though this God has not changed. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, because it's exactly what I was saying to you at the very beginning when I said, I don't know that I need to share this part of it, but like, I'm not saying I wouldn't have bought it if it said Jesus on the front, but I know I have that correlation with Christianity and Jesus and God, and the you're not preachy about it. It's just, you know what, it's your experience. And for me, like it was perfection because it landed. It was able to land softly in a way that made me reconsider my own, not aversion, but resistance to the term God.
Sure. Well, you saw the rhythm, and it's on purpose. Again, it was that me writing it in my head before, like, literally I have a chapter, chapter 7, that's like, I was doing perfectly fine, then damn it, here comes Jesus. Like I basically I mentioned God a little bit in chapter 1 at the beginning, and then there's 5-6 chapters that are, you don't discover God again until I do. So I take you through like, I really love women, just keeping it real. I walk you through all these things that when I get to the kind of Jesus experience, you just kind of take it because I'm just telling you about the rest of my life. But in the midst of that moment, I say, similar to how musical theater changed me, similar to how this thing changed me, this God thing was about to change me, but it was going to jack me up in a bad way before it gets better. Like, and that's why the next chapter is I'm supposed to do what? Like, there's this idea that people come to God and then suddenly it's like, my life was this. Like, for me, it was not that. Suddenly I had to deal with rules and guilt for, you know what I mean? Like, and that ran with me for the rest of my life through so many things. But also now that I look back, man, and I almost get a little emotional thinking about it. If you would have told my high school senior, this Black kid who like came to know God, threw away all of this music that he thought was bad, except for his musicals, and started listening to things like Sandy Patty, right? That now, as an adult, that Sandy Patty, who I used to listen to in my Chevy Celebrity, and people would get in my car and be like, why are you listening to this music? Sandy read my book. Sandy Patty read my book, and she left me a voice message, and said, thank you for changing my life with your book. And I can't say all the really personal things she said because it's super intense, but I'm listening to this message from Sandy Patty. Mm-hmm. And if anybody knows who she is, they're listening to this podcast, you're going to be like, that's crazy. But I was listening to this message from Sandy Patty and going, I cannot believe that my life led here. My life led me here. And gosh, that's the power of sliding doors, man.
Yeah. And it's I think whether this was intended or not, when I was reading all the, like, when you met Jesus again and it was reintroduced again, right? 5 chapters later.
Yeah.
My mentality was, I'm just reading Tyler's story. I didn't realize that a crack in the egg had happened. Where when I got to that part about the Alicia Keys song, it was like the egg just burst, and all of a sudden it was like, oh, like it can be this without all the hypocrisy and all the things that I've pushed away, right? And I feel that like I'm sitting here right now and I'm just thinking like everything in my life led me here. Like I feel that way, just like having this conversation. It's just like, what in the world? Like crazy.
It's crazy. And I will tell you this, I if you would have told me like Tyler, because you talk to authors all the time. In my book specifically, there's this thing called bestie syndrome where people feel like they're your best friend after they spend time with you. I get that so much because how open I am. So people will write me and go, hey, I never write an author ever, but I just finished your book and I feel like I have to, I really highly underestimated how impacted people were going to be by the spiritual part of this book. Like, highly underestimated how many like people that threw away like any sort of religion, like read the book and they came back and they're like, this was probably the most spiritual book I've ever read, and I know that you did not intend that.
Yeah.
And I did not, right? At all. There's no like altar call, and there's no moment where I'm like, come to God. Nothing. It's actually the opposite of that.
That's why I think
like,
it works.
Right. You know, it's like you're just kind of walking with me. And so if I don't care if people say they got in touch again with Jesus, if they have a history with Buddhism or Muslim, whatever it is, there's that experiential thing that people locked into. So that's why I'm so passionate about this freaking book. Sure, all of us want to be successful and go, our book did well or whatever, but it's so much bigger for me than that, Elizabeth. So much bigger.
Yeah.
And this is the thing that I love. And I want to say this to you and to anybody that's listening to this who's read it. It's like a good movie, right? When you see a good movie and you walk out of that movie and you're like, oh my gosh, I have to go call Eric and tell him he needs to come see this movie. And they don't get it until they see the movie too, right? Then they see the movie and they're like, oh my gosh, why did I wait so long to see this? It's been a beautiful thing with I Take My Coffee Black for people who are like, I had this sitting on my counter for 6 months. I picked it up and just started on page 1 and I just never put it down. Or I put in the audiobook and I would sit in the driveway and just listen. I didn't go inside, or I walked an extra mile because I wanted to get through it. And then when they're done, they're like, they have to tell somebody. Mm-hmm. You know, that's such a beautiful, wonderful, incredible thing when you create something and people feel that way about it. And that's been the reaction that I Take My Coffee Black. And I'm floored by it. But I also, because I think it's important, I cheer it on, you know?
I love that because, I mean, if you're not going to cheer it on, who is?
Right.
You know,
right.
But it's such a gift. Like, I just want to say thank you. One, for being here, because we went way over. I was like, I just need Tyler for 30 minutes. We went way over. I have loved chatting with you. And what you put in here, it's just a gift. And for people who can't see, I'm holding up the book. It's a gift. It's a gift. And the ripple effect of it is just going to keep going and going and going. I just know that in my heart. It's beautiful.
I appreciate that.
I can't wait till the next one.
Yeah.
And the children's book.
Yeah, we will see. And you're in Phoenix?
I'm in Phoenix.
So I'll have to make sure whenever I come through Phoenix, we will have to
please. We'll have coffee.
For sure. 100%.
Thank you. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you.
You are so welcome. Thanks so much for listening today. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd be so grateful if you'd take just 2 seconds, that's seriously all it takes, to review, subscribe, or even share this episode with someone that you dearly love so I can help more people get their damn books written already. Have an amazing rest of your day, and I'll talk to you again soon.
hey, I never write an author ever, but I just finished your book and I feel like I have to, you know. I really highly underestimated how impacted people were going to be by the spiritual part of this book. Like, highly underestimated how many like people that threw away like any sort of religion, like read the book and they came back and they're like, this was probably the most spiritual book I've ever read, and I know that you did not intend that.
Yeah.
And I did not, right, at all. There's no like altar call, and there's no moment where I'm like, come to God. Nothing. It's actually the opposite of that.
That's why I think it works.
Right. You know, it's like you're just kind of walking with me. And so if I don't care if people say they got in touch again with Jesus, if they have a history with Buddhism or Muslim, whatever it is, there's that experiential thing that people locked into. So that's why I'm so passionate about this freaking book. You know, sure, all of us want to be successful and go, our book did well or whatever, but it's so much bigger for me than that, Elizabeth. So much bigger.
Yeah.
And this is the thing that I love. And I want to say this to you and to anybody that's listening to this who's read it. It's like a good movie, right? When you see a good movie and you walk out of that movie and you're like, oh my gosh, I have to go call Eric and tell him he needs to come see this movie. And they don't get it until they see the movie too, right? Then they see the movie and they're like, oh my gosh, why did I wait so long to see this? It's been a beautiful thing with I Take My Coffee Black for people who are like, I had this sitting on my counter for 6 months. I picked it up and just started on page 1 and I just never put it down. Or I put in the audiobook and I would sit in the driveway and just listen. I didn't go inside, or I walked an extra mile because I wanted to get through it. And then when they're done, they're like, they have to tell somebody. Mm-hmm. You know, that's such a beautiful, wonderful, incredible thing when you create something and people feel that way about it. And that's been the reaction that I Take My Coffee Black. And I'm floored by it. But I also, because I think it's important, I cheer it on, you know?
I love that because, I mean, if you're not going to cheer it on, who is?
Right.
You know,
right.
But it's such a gift. Like, I just want to say thank you. One, for being here, because we went way over. I was like, I just need Tyler for 30 minutes. We went way over. I have loved chatting with you. And what you put in here, it's just a gift. And for people who can't see, I'm holding up the book. It's a gift. It's a gift. And the ripple effect of it is just going to keep going and going and going. I just know that in my heart. It's beautiful.
I appreciate that.
I can't wait till the next one.
Yeah.
And the children's book.
Yeah, we will see. And you're in Phoenix?
I'm in Phoenix.
So I'll have to make sure whenever I come through Phoenix, we will have to
please. We'll have coffee.
For sure. 100%.
Yes, I would love that. And I'll record the intro to this separate later and mention the book, and I'll put all your links and all the things. And yeah, thank you. Thank you. Of course.
Thank you.
You are so welcome. Have an amazing rest of your day.
I'm going to try to. Okay. I was looking forward to chatting with you. I'm glad I had some extra time to do so.
Me too.
I feel like time just flew. It was good.
I know. I was like, I'm going to keep it to 30. I'm going to keep it to 30. No one's going to want me to keep it to 30 on this one. So who cares? If it's just me talking, they're like, Elizabeth, can you brevity, please? But they're going to want you to keep going. It's fine. So
when do you think you're going to put it up?
It won't be long. I'm thinking, so I did one yesterday with, are you familiar with Zibby Owens?
I know the name.
Okay. So it'll probably be not next week, but the following week.
Sure. It's all good.
It'll be quick.
Perfect.
Because I want it out there. Yeah.
All right, my dear.
Okay.
Thanks for the chat. We'll talk soon.
Thank you. Of course. Okay. Bye-bye.